Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming back to the podcast. So today, James and I want to discuss whether it's better to be a jack of all trades or a master of one. And I think, from my opinion, it depends on where you are in your career, I guess. And if we're talking about, your career in business only, a lot of times coming out of college, or if you didn't go to college, you may be really skilled at one thing, and that's what gets you in the door. But is that one skill you're going to pull you through promotions and management supervisor positions, or is expanding your knowledge to encompass a lot of other pieces of your work and your business going to be more beneficial to you? So what do you think, James?
Yeah, that's right, Randy. And you're probably correct to start with what is it that gets you hired by a company, whether you're early in your career or at any stage in your career. The company is hiring you, or you enter into an organization because of something that they're looking for and something on your resume. You're an accountant, you're a project manager, you're a marketer, you're a lawyer, whatever. And those are specific skills that they're looking for, and you have to have basic competence in what they're looking for, or you're not going to get hired. So there is probably at least one area, and maybe a couple of areas in your education and your experience where you could say, okay, I'm pretty good here. I'm strong in this area because I've had training, I've gone to school, I've had some work experience. So it's absolutely critical to have something like that makes you, that's what makes you attractive at all, gets your foot in the door. I think the question that we want to explore is what keeps you in the company, what makes you successful in the company. Can you continue deepening your experience and your expertise in that one area? Obviously, yes. If I think of tax lawyers or IP lawyers or accountants or marketers, or actually people in a lot of different parts of the company, many of them stayed in their department or their division and got better because they got more experience. They learned how the company worked. They practiced their skills in that area. And whatever their level of expertise was when they started, they deepened their level of expertise and they became really valuable in those roles. An accountant or a finance person who totally understands their area of the business, and they can answer questions quickly, do research quickly, they can add value related to their core competency, and it's quite valuable. So to start with, I guess I would say it is useful to remember what got you hired, and it's useful to keep up to date in that area, and it's useful to think of how you can expand in adjacent areas close to and related to the skill that got you in the door. It's probably not enough, but I also see the opposite happening, which is that people don't stay up to date on their field. They don't, they rely on what they learned 30 years ago in school, and they don't go get continuing education. And they're just running the same old program that's been running. That's not a way to stand out either. So if you do have a skill and you were hired for that skill, it pays to expand upon and deepen that skill.
I think that's also a part of being jack of all trades. I mean, you are the master when you come in of law or accounting or whatever, but things are always evolving. They're always teaching new things in college, and they're always putting out new things in journals that other people in your profession have discovered. And you being a part of that and being on the cusp of, the next generation of techniques and tools in your profession is part of being a jack of all trades. On the other hand, I like what you said about expanding your knowledge of the business, because yes, I'm a lawyer. If I use the military's experience, I went to law school. The military paid for my education. Now I have to serve 3 years. I'm going to apply that legal stuff in the military, but the military is a different animal than even probably normal government lawyers and other types of lawyers, because they have rules of law, rules of war. When you go to war, what are we allowed to do? How's that interpreted? What if we do this? Oh, you're trying to get around the law, or are we just trying to work through the law? There's different, I think we talked about this before in a previous episode, where it's like officers or commanders would say, I want to do this. So like, that's against the law. Okay, that's really final. How do we mitigate it? How do we put parameters in place where we can do this because I need this to win the war and it's not against the law? What specifically makes it against the law? And can we put mitigations in place where it's no longer against the law? Is that going around the law, or is that working within the law, making it possible because we've taken all the precautions?
I guess I need to explore terminology with you a little bit, Randy, because what you're describing, no, just to make sure we have the same understanding. When you say jack of all trades, I think of that as different than what you're describing, of a person who gets really effective in one role. So the lawyer or the accountant, whatever, they learn the business, they learn how to apply what they learned in school in a pragmatic way to help get things done. I consider that a person who is just getting better in their core competence. So that's a master of one in my terminology. When I think of jack of all trades, I'm thinking of the person who says, I want to learn project management skills. I want to learn presentation skills. I actually want to learn marketing skills. And is there a way for me to branch out outside of my core expertise? In my particular case, I'll give you an example. I was a lawyer, right? That's why they hired me. But then I said, when I had opportunities, I'd like to do additional things. I wanted to run the company intranet project or introduce a wiki to the company, which has nothing to do with legal skills, but it was a chance to see if I could do project management, change management, which I sucked at, by the way. And it was a real learning to see that expertise in one domain does not necessarily translate to another domain. So for me, the jack of all trades is more someone who gets good at other areas, not necessarily relating to their core area. You know what I'm getting at?
No, I know what you're getting at, and I'm not as articulate as you, but I see what you're doing as kind of what I was saying, which is, so there's all kinds of different facets of the military. And the last one I was involved in Italy was basically military officers that went to other countries, worked for the ambassador, basically at the embassy, to influence the country to buy specific equipment from America to make their militaries and police and security forces better. All right. Now there's so much, there's just a book of laws about how to do that and where that money comes from and how to do it. And, you know, a lot of lawyers straight out of law school is like, hey, you're assigned to this unit. And like, what are we doing? And now they have to learn a new kind of law that was never probably ever discussed in law school. And not only learn that law, but learn, kind of go out into the field and say, what are we trying to do? And why are we trying to do it? And are we trying to do it for the right reasons? And how do the laws work for and against that? And I feel like that's a part of jack of all trades, because you could be you could have been #1 law student at Harvard, and then you come here and you're just really bad at it because you have no interest in it and you don't want to go in the field and things like that. Does that make sense? Is that still not what you're talking about, or is that still a phase of it? Because like, let me one more thing. So what you just said is, hey, I wanted to get into project management and things like that. And even though you were bad at it, now you are a lawyer that works for this company that knows about that. So when they have a question about that, they're going to go, who's got some experience in project management? It's like, well, I suck at it, but I did take some courses or something like that.
Exactly.
So you're the go-to guy.
It's like you raising your hand when it is the question, does anybody speak French? And you spoke some French and maybe, you know, so yes, it's exactly that phenomenon that I think we're exploring here. You're making a good point, and I understand your point now. So that was a helpful explanation, which is, even though you might be quote unquote expert when you graduate and finish school, you've got a degree, you are not expert when it comes to the value you can offer to your organization, because there's a lot that you may not have seen. It's not a criticism, it's just you learn as you are doing it in context. And that requires you to gain additional skills, and you should have an open mindset that says, hey, I am, at the moment I graduate, the most knowledgeable person in the world about my field. But when it comes to applying your knowledge in a practical way in your company, you are not the most knowledgeable person, and you need to have a learning mindset. So yes, from that perspective, I think your I understand your comment now. I was actually raising the bar one step further, which is to say, okay, you new graduate coming into an organization, yes, you need to work like crazy to make sure that you listen to others, learn about how the organization works, learn how to get stuff done practically. By the way, a big part of being effective in your role as an expert is just knowing how stuff gets done in your company. It's not a legal question. It's which boss do I go to? Who's going to be open to an argument about doing it this way versus this way? Who's going to shut me down because they don't want to take any risk? There's human factors, there's practical factors, there's timing factors that go into how you leverage your subject matter expertise. So all of that is correct and accurate, 100% supported. And maybe it was premature, but I was proposing that we go beyond that and say, now you're a total kick-ass lawyer, accountant, project manager, whatever. Should you, and is it beneficial to you to try and take on the additional French or, internet or cybersecurity or whatever the other topic is? Or are you just fooling yourself that because you don't have deep expertise, you're never going to be as valuable as somebody who does spend all of their day job over in that area? Maybe let's explore that. You've already given an example that the French actually did open up doors for you that it wouldn't have otherwise.
So I have a couple different views of this. I'll use my military experience on a Green Beret A team. There's 12 guys there. There's two weapons specialists, 2 engineer and demolition specialists, 2 medics, 2 commo sergeants. So they're replaceable. Like if one gets shot, then we can still make commo, or we can still heal somebody, or the guy can heal the guy that got shot, And then there's 2 officers that are supposed to, know what's going on. And then there's an intelligence NCO and an actual senior NCO, a team sergeant. And ideally, the intelligence NCO was like the senior enlisted guy below the team sergeant. So if the team sergeant got hurt, then that guy could immediately take charge. Or you could go to 2 6-man teams. That was always the idea, that you could split it into 6-man teams and they'd all work together because they had worked together. Now, even though you got 2 of each profession, so to speak, many times the teams weren't complete because we didn't have enough people passing the Q course. So we sometimes went to war with 9 people or 10 people or 11 people. And also, just because those 2 guys are communication guys and can set up satellites and, antennas to talk across the world, doesn't mean that those are the only 2 guys that are going to do it, because there's a lot of equipment to lug around. And if you go split team and that combo guy on your 6-man team goes down, then who's going to set up the radio? So there's all of this cross training. And there are some people that just, and everyone made jokes that the weapons sergeant was the least intelligent guy on the team, just because there was not a lot of high school, college education knowledge involved in taking apart, fixing, and putting together and shooting weapons. So the idea was, those guys are the least intelligent on the team. Now, I'll say the first job I did was a weapons sergeant. and then I went and became a medic, and the medic is supposedly the smartest guy on the team, because basically you go to medical school in a year and a half, and then you come out and you're doing amputations and you're diagnosing people with rare jungle diseases, and you're bringing people back to life with doing CPR and shocking them and a variety of other things, and you've learned all these skills that most people go to medical school for. They go to college for 4 years in medical school, then they specialize, and you come out the other end. The thing on the team was everyone learns everyone's job. And there were some people that just throw up their hands. It's like, this isn't my job. I'll never learn how to do it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not going to do it. That guy became what we call a one-trick pony. And the reality was, eventually you're like, no one's, if you can't help everybody else do their job because you're saying you're not smart enough, maybe I don't want you on my team and I want someone else. That's kind of an extreme example because we had a limited amount of people and a small amount of people to choose from. But if you when I was a weapons guy, I also I hung out with the engineer. I'm like, hey, teach me how to blow things up. How do I use a time fuse? How do I not blow myself up? How do I not blow the team up? And I learned all that. And then I helped the guy set the antennas up and hey, what are you doing now? Oh, this thing gets loaded this way. Okay, all right, I got to figure it out. And then I would even say, let me do it today. And I would figure all this stuff out. People would say, hey, Randy, he's pretty smart. He's not a one-trick pony. He can do a little bit of everything. And some people looked at that, though, the not being a one-trick pony was I got to go to a bunch of schools. I got to go to sniper school, and I got to go to scuba school, and I got to go to ninja school or whatever, right? And so they would get all these qualifications. It's like, I'm not a one-trick pony. Look, I have all these abilities. But that's not what me, when I was a supervisor, when I became a team sergeant, that's not what I looked at. I looked at as, hey, are you able to kind of help everyone out and make everyone stronger because of your presence? Or are you still a one-trick pony? Like, I only do engineering stuff, and if you need me to shoot a sniper rifle, I'll do it. But all this other stuff, I don't get it. I'm not going to help out. I'm not the expert. They're the expert. Why should I help out? And so it was, once again, going back to what we talked about in some of our first episodes, which was volunteering, showing initiative, being a team player. And that all involves, I think, becoming a jack of all trades. So, hey, I think it's a little bit, maybe you can tell me or not, but like, if you're a lawyer and you're hired to be a lawyer, then you really need to stay on your lawyer stuff, right? It's really hard to kind of go right or left outside your kind of lawyer right and left limits, because this is what you were hired to do. And if you don't do it well, then why do we have you here? We need another lawyer. But if you have the time and the mental excess to go into a different way and delve into something else, learning French, for instance, or program managing and something like that, or if they have some downtime and say, hey, the best idea, talking about volunteering and showing initiative, if you noticed on the calendar, on the business calendar, hey, we have some downtime where I'm not so busy, I could probably use an extra 2 hours a day to study French or dig into program managing, or I could take this week off and just get into a program managing program, for lack of a better word, and learn about what's going on over here. Then I think that goes back to, just like we said, volunteering, showing initiative, being a team player, and using your time wisely. And being that jack of all trades always helps a little bit, if not more.
That's a helpful description of how you personally experienced it and how you think the military deals with it. And I think, if I can, let me highlight a few things that I took away from that summary, Randy. First, maybe with something you said near the end about, if I've hired you for a lawyer, it's harder for you to step out of your lane. I'll give you an easy example of where that comes up actually for company lawyers all the time, which is, yeah, we are hired for our legal skills, but 3/4 of CEOs ask their general counsels to weigh in on business strategy questions, because they know we've got good judgment, we are good at analysis, we can look at things objectively, we come with a different mindset. So they want us to use our skills in other areas. And some lawyers are comfortable doing that, and some lawyers are not comfortable doing that. They say, hey, I'm here to provide answers on legal questions. I don't want to get into business strategy. Well, okay, that's a missed opportunity if you aren't willing to add that one trade to your tool belt. And that gets to an important thing that's going to affect how people approach this question, which is, what's the type of organization in, the type of team they're in, the size of the organization. If you're in a giant company or organization that has 15 specialists for every role, you're probably not going to wear many different hats. You're not going to have to wear many different hats. They have the accountant to answer the finance questions. They have the lawyer to answer the legal questions. They have the product manager to answer the product questions. So what you were describing with the Green Beret A-Team, 6 interchangeable people, it's extremely helpful to have someone who can do more than just one thing, because you never know if you're going to be stuck with not 9 people, but 5 people, and then what do you do? So yes, I accept that there's going to be a different answer here, potentially, depending upon the type of organization you're in. But as your story demonstrated, there's something important I think we need to highlight here, which is how much expertise is necessary for you to gain a benefit from showing yourself curious and interested and open to trying new things. It's incremental. You just need to be a little bit more curious, a little bit better than the person over here who says, I don't know anything about that and I don't want to learn. A couple hours, right, of paying attention and learning something makes you both interesting and potentially valuable to a team that has a choice of either nothing or, well, we got Randy. So don't think that you have to go off and get a degree or become a super expert. I agree with you on that one. That's not what makes you a jack of all trades. It's more the attitude and the openness to saying, well, that's not my job, but I'm interested in. So the relative expertise that's necessary is just more than the other guy. That's all. Which is why, again, I think you're going to be affected by the size of the organization. If the company always has on hand 15 experts in PowerPoint, well, they're not going to care that you took a class and know a little bit about it.
I mean, I think also the kind of an extension of that is, who does a company want as a supervisor? Do they want someone who, you're still, we'll step away from lawyers, but let's like, hey, you're a programmer and you programmed your whole life, but you never dipped your toes in marketing or talking to clients or things like that. And do you want someone who's really good at one thing, or pretty good, but not the best at one thing, but he knows a lot about it, and he kind of expanded his horizons, so he knows a little bit about how the whole business works, and he's talked to different specialities. And so when he's a supervisor, in his mind, it's easy for him or her to kind of bring all these things to the table. And I found that that was really my strength when I got experience in all these different. I got experience in working in an embassy environment. Well, whenever a military team goes to another country, the ambassador is the representative of the president for the United States, anybody who works for the United States government, which includes the military. Now, there is a general somewhere, and in the case of South America, that general's sitting in Miami, and he is in charge of all military forces in South America. However, the ambassador can kick anybody that's an American in the government, working for the government, out of the country for doing something stupid anytime he wants to. If you just like insult him in the hallway, he could do that. I'm sure that doesn't happen very often, but if you're just not aware of what's going on, he could say, you're not an asset here, get the hell out of my country. And then the general's got to explain why they send an idiot to work for the ambassador. So the fact that I worked in an embassy and I understood that, hey, there's a general that I have to report to, but if the ambassador's not happy with me, I'm not going to work here. So I can't just say, and the ambassador has his own people that work for him. And so you have to kind of have an awareness of the environment you work in to say, yes, sir, I'm not authorized to do that. I'm gonna have to talk to my general, as opposed to, hell no, I'm not going to do that, and just shut down the ambassador's staff. And then the next thing, the ambassador is like, hey, the military said they're not going to do that. It's like, well, then why are they even in my country? Kick them out. That I'm sure that has happened in the past but I also think that most ambassadors, and maybe not the staff so much, but the ambassadors understand that new military people come into the country all the time, and they don't understand the chains of command that are, crosswise and up and down. And so they'll call the general, because they have a relationship with that person who's in charge of all the military in their country. And he's like, hey, your stupid captain said this, and this. And he's like, hold on, I'll talk to him. And then, you get a good talking to, and then you're a better person for it. So my experience was, hey, I knew how the embassy worked. I knew how all the change of commands worked, which a lot of people in the military don't understand. They show up and they're like, hey, I'm here to help. And they do whatever they want, not realizing that really the embassy is in control of this as the senior person in the country. And my experience with this was also put me in different positions and jobs later on, where they're like, hey, we're looking for a guy who knows about Green Berets, knows how embassies work, speaks languages, and just kind of this jack of all trades thing that we're talking about. I wouldn't say I was excellent at everything, but I had such a broad bunch of experience and skills, that jack of all trades piece, that when they look at me and they look at another guy, it's like, this guy if you send him to war, he's going to win. But guess what? We're not at war in Africa. So do we need, Joe Hero? Or do you need a guy that understands that the ambassadors that got to say so, and he's still got to report to the general and then also report to this guy? And so that's that's a very kind of narrow way to look at it, but it also shows how the jack of all trades, especially as you progress in your profession, can play out for you.
Yeah, I don't think it's a narrow way to look at it. I think it's similar to what I was trying to say before myself in terms of how do you, even if you're there as a subject matter expert, really become effective in your role. It is by really understanding how the organization works, exactly as you're describing. This part is connected to this part in this way, and this person has an influence, and I need to understand that that person is worried about this. Understanding how your organization works at a high level is super important. If you never intend to get out of your specialist role, even then it's super important. And I think you've added an element to it though, which is that allows for having that broad perspective, allows for a kind of mobility. You could do other jobs and you might be tapped for other positions just exactly because of that facility in understanding how the organization works and thinks. I used to tell my team, and I think it applies to anybody in any position, the way I would get them to think about this question was, where do you see yourself and what you're doing in the company strategy? How does your activity right now fit with some overall company objective? What are you helping the company achieve that the company cares about? And if they're like, I'm just doing what you told me, well, okay, they're not thinking for themselves and they're not looking at the big picture question. Whether you work in the cafeteria, whether you work in the motor pool, whether you work in the finance department, whether you're in the boardroom, you need to be able to answer that question. What's the overall organizational purpose and how's what I'm doing connect with that purpose? That is a super helpful perspective. I would agree with you. I think it's enough to say that is something that will make you very effective in your role. And I like that you added the perspective, Randy, that, and oh, by the way, it also means that you might be capable of moving into an adjacent role just by virtue of that openness and that perspective.
Yeah, there's an element of making your own luck in being a jack of all trades, because you never know when a skill or an experience that you initiate to learn is going to come into play about, choosing you inside the company for a specific job that may help you, get promoted faster or be in, a more manager position or something like that. And that's happened to me so many times. I can't even tell you, James. I mean, I applied for the job to work in Colombia, and I'd been to the Colombian Commando School. So the guy in charge of all military in the embassy, there's a colonel, and he's like, I have to visit all these colonels and generals in Colombia all the time, and every single one of those officers in the Colombian army has been to Colombian Lancero School. I haven't. But if I got this guy with me and he comes in with the badge, then that gets me in the door to talk to these guys even easier. And so when they have four guys, possible guys they can choose from, who are they going to choose? The guy that's going to, even if we all, we all did so many times on the teams. We went to Afghanistan so many times. We spent so much time in Colombia, but who speaks fluent Spanish and who can help me through my mission by getting in to talk to these people that's part of my job.
Yeah. And so, if I want to try and summarize a few points about what people can take away and concretely try to apply themselves from what we've been talking about, I think there are some concrete takeaways. I'll take a stab at it and you tell me if they make sense, Randy. I would say we would recommend that people be curious. Keep an eye on the big picture for their organization. How do the different parts interact and how do things get done? Be open to opportunities and don't worry if it's not clear to you how a particular thing that you might be asked to do or have an opportunity to do is going to help you. It very often has no relevance whatsoever until later. So those are some of the things I think we could say would help a person develop in their career if they are interested in becoming more of a jack of all trades. What else would you add to the list?
I mean, I think everything you just said can be encompassed in be a team player. And also, I never went around saying to people in the different departments and going, what can you do for me? I went in saying, hey, what can I do for you from my position? What do you need from my department? And then I learn what they do there and kind of learn also what they could do for me just by default. but it was always more of a giving than a taking, be a team player and, try to help other people in the department with your specialty if they need you. And then by that end, also kind of learning what all the different players around you and departments are doing so that you can better integrate yourself and help everyone out. So be a team player, I think, is super important.
I like that, Randy. I observed that particularly when people get busy and they're under pressure, they get very selfish in a way. They say, listen, I got so much going on. I have to focus on number one. And they become much less of a team player, much less willing to help out their colleagues. Especially though, I would say in those environments, you can stand out like crazy if you remain helpful. If you say, hey, look, I'm willing to help you out. You still got to get your own work done. So this does put more responsibility and work on one's shoulders. But it's so helpful to how people perceive you and think of you that I would say that's a trade-off that's worth making. I've observed over many years watching people in the work environment. You can tell who's turned off and is not willing to help their colleagues anymore, and who is still willing to be a team player. And the team players do stand out. So that is a nice summary.
Okay, well, I hope that our listeners got something out of today, and then they'll tune in, subscribe, and comment, and join us next time.
Thanks, everybody.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.